seamless. I don't know if this helps you. The other thing you do is we have a lot of places have regular sitting meditation practice. Like here, it's every day at 5:15 in the afternoon. What time in the morning? 6:15 or 6:30? So 6:15, 7:15 in the morning, which is open. You just come in, grab your stuff, and sit. Or 5:15, 6:15 in the afternoon. I wouldn't recommend sitting outside yet. Um, I know it sounds cool when you see all these pictures of, hermits in the deep recluses of the jungles and whatnot. But unless you've got some real concentration power, it can be very distracting outside, depending on where you do it. Like a nice space on campus will not be very tranquil. And then people are like, hey, what are you doing? Are you meditating? Yeah, so it's hard to find a quiet place. Also, don't do it in direct sunlight, and don't do it in wind, because it scatters the prana, the chi. So if you're going to sit outside, find a nice place that's like the Buddha was actually under a tree. And again, find an environment that isn't too extreme. I know you've seen movies of macho cultivators sitting on glaciers in the middle of streams on rocks and things. That's very dramatic and Hollywood effect, but especially for beginners, it's not recommended. Also, do not take up the practice of sitting in a cemetery yet. Well, actually, in America, you probably could. It wouldn't make much difference. Most cemeteries are better than parks in America. But in previous times, there was one of the Dhutanga advanced practices was to sit in a cemetery, a charnel ground, and that meant a real cemetery. Where the body parts were all out, and there was decomposition going on, and it was a advanced state. So don't do that either. I don't know, does that help? Anybody else got other advice? Put on earphones. Yeah, so dead earphones, right? Not plugged into CNN or something. Earplugged. Yeah. Right, so you could probably try that. What you'll find in either case is you'll be confronting your mind. So even in the most quiet place like here, if you really practice for a while, it'll start to get very noisy. You'll even complain the incense makes noise when it burns. And if there's a mosquito or fly in the room and you don't have concentration, then that will just take all your attention. So the more you try to focus your mind, the more it's going to try to squeeze away. You ever try to sit on a ball in the water? It's that kind of feeling. You get that ball underneath, and you try to sit, and it turns up. The mind is that way too. That's why it's called the monkey mind. But don't mistake when that happens for that you're not making progress. Because the very fact that you're confronting it and engaging it is already progress. It's still a monkey mind when you're not, but you're not aware of it. So it's just taking all your fruit and stealing and running away with it. You don't realize it's gone. Now when you actually confront it, wow, it's a little more difficult. Okay? Any other questions on that? Yes? Oh, so we're going through 3 consecutive Friday nights. We're going through the basics of the sitting meditation. Last Friday we did the sitting aspect of it, what to do with the body. Tonight we're going to talk about the breathing. And then coming soon, next Friday, we're going to talk about your question is what do you do in the mental inner dimension of concentration? How do you focus the mind in that way? So we're going in 3 stages. So tonight I'll just launch a little bit into the breathing then as a beginning. So once you get the posture set, as we described last week, and you check these, often the best thing to do is when you start, just go through the checklist again. Hips, shoulders, head, jaw, tongue, eyes, mouth, hands, arms, legs. Is that all set? And then most importantly, is the whole body very natural and relaxed? Is there any place that I'm tense or holding it? At the beginning, go through and just relax it. Most importantly, this area, the middle area of the diaphragm, the stomach, and the lower abdomen and the dantian. That should be very, very soft and very relaxed. If you have that extremely soft and relaxed, so there's no tension there whatsoever, the rest of your body will open up. It won't be tight. And your breathing will then naturally drop down by itself. I want to stress this because although I'm talking about the breathing tonight, the vehicle, the vessel within which that breathing takes place has to be conducive for this deep Chan breathing to occur. You can't just do the breathing without it simultaneously relaxing and softening the whole body so that when you breathe, your whole stomach and lower abdomen is very relaxed and the breathing just drops down naturally. So, the kind of breathing not to do, there's three kinds that they talk about in the text. One is called a uneven breathing, and that's where the inhale is either longer or shorter than the exhale. So your inhale may be short and your exhale is long, or your inhale is long, your exhale is short, but they're not of the same length. So you want to avoid that kind of breathing. That's the first one, it's called uneven. The other type of breathing to avoid is called broken breathing, and that is in the inhale or the exhale, instead of it being a continuous, unbroken movement, it stops and breaks off and then continues. So on the inhale, you might be jerky, and on the exhale, the same thing. Often you can correspond the relationship to the breathing to your state of mind. So if you get agitated or excited, the breathing will become uneven and broken. And that's one way to measure what's going on with the thought process. So that's the second type to avoid. The third type to avoid is what's called power breathing or chi breathing. And this is when you're using force or energy to the... It's the kind of thing you always see in the martial arts movies before someone does something dramatic. You know, and then something happens. You know, the brick breaks or the trees part, or that kind of breathing is too controlled. It's too muscular, and so you avoid that too. This is not about. In fact, if you try that breathing, you can do it now if you want to, but just bring it in. You feel your whole body will then tighten up, and there's a rigidity that happens, and that's the opposite of what you want to have. You want to have a kid's body, a really young kid's body, like 1-year-old or younger. When they're sleeping, that's the kind of... Now, I don't recommend sleeping. I'm just saying your body should be that loose and relaxed. So, the type of breathing then is talked about, it called Chan, or breathing, is a breathing that takes place completely on its own. You don't have to attend to it. It's very natural. So once your body is in this position and everything is relaxed, and then as of next week, your mind is focusing on your meditation topic, the breathing will naturally come in and naturally go out in a very even, unbroken, and unforced way by itself. That's the wonderfulness about this. So you don't have to aim to develop Chan or breathing. It'll happen naturally when the posture and the positions are right, and when your mind develops its focus. The breathing will then take care of itself very naturally. And the more you concentrate and the more you practice this, the breathing will become softer, more indistinct, less traceable. And the texts say you're breathing, but it's like you're not breathing. It's like you're not breathing, yet you're breathing. And so it's so quiet, so natural, that you hardly really even notice it. That's the type of breathing you want to let happen. I don't want to say it's the type of breathing you want to practice, but let happen. Let that breathing happen. And most of the time, if you want to take a measure of your stress or anxiety, just pay attention to the breathing. It will tell you immediately where you are. The next time you get angry or jealous, I know it won't happen very often, so it's hard to do this, but when those emotions arise, or fear, You will then, if you take note of your breathing, see that it has gone into one of these uneven, broken, forceful, disruptive, not natural ways. Okay? So the breathing will happen and take care of itself. Once you get into this, as you deepen your meditation practice, it could be that somebody at the outside doesn't even think you're breathing. If they observe you, they won't be able to see much really going on in the way of respiration. It's so relaxed, it's so deep, it's so natural. There's hardly anything going on, and yet you don't feel constrained. You don't feel like you have to take a breath. It just settles and disappears by itself. So next week I'll talk about different meditation practices with the mind, but one practice is to use a certain technique where you layer your concentration following the breathing. Okay, so that the breathing, once it starts to get into that natural rhythm autonomically by itself, then you can layer your concentration on the top of that. And so that your mind is just sort of going in its meditation topic with the breathing. So you're not directing the breathing, you're following the breathing. Okay? So we'll talk about that a little bit next week. Any questions on that? On the breathing? The sitting? Okay. So now we're going to go back into our text, maybe. And we met last night, and we're slowly moving ahead. This is really not easy translation work. Am I the consensus of the group? Sometimes they're nodding. Sometimes I come and we spend 45 minutes on 3 or 4 characters and still trying to figure out. Where are we, by the way? Is there something wrong with that screen? Or is that my eyes? It's warming up? Oh. Screens warm up. Okay. As it's warming up, do you know where we are? Okay, in general, right? Cultivators either first experience. Is that right? Okay. So let me say some things at the outset. The characters, either Wu or Puti or Kai Wu, these are used interchangeably to mean awakening. Sometimes it's translated as enlightening or enlightenment, but I prefer awakening. Hanshan's going to go into this tonight, but there's not one kind of awakening. It's not like there's awakening, and then that's it. The Buddha had awakening, and then we're striving to replicate that experience and have our awakening. But rather, awakening, and he's just going to go into a couple tonight, but it comes in many degrees, many differences, many shades, from something very initial, very quiet, almost you wouldn't notice it, to something extremely profound and complete, anuttara samyak sambodhi, perfect, complete enlightenment. But there's gradations all the way along. In the same way, the timing and the sequence of how this happens also is not a one-time experience or a 2-time or a 3-time experience, but can occur over the course of an entire lifetime. And if we read the text closely, over lifetimes. So when you read the text of somebody who has an awakening experience, say someone like Huineng, the 6th patriarch, who hears a line of verse as he's carrying firewood and has an awakening experience, you and I could go out and carry firewood and listen to one-liners coming out of the monastery all day long and might not have an awakening experience. And thinking, well, we're doing it, we're carrying the firewood, we're listening, the monk's standing at the doorstep, he's saying, leave your mind unattached, clinging to nothing. And it's okay, didn't happen. Back and forth. why does it happen to him and not happen to us? And the reason is that the causes and conditions, the nurturing of the ground that gets to the stage where one line or one experience like that can cause an opening of your mind and heart to something, is cultivated over a long period of time. Now, the moment where there's something that actually bears fruit can be pretty quick or pretty instantaneous, but the amount of effort that goes into that could have taken place over a process of a lifetime or many lifetimes. And we know this from the Buddha's own story too. So it's said that all these great awakening experiences have deep, deep, deep cultivated roots that go way back. So the important thing to remember here is not when and where you're going to get the fruit or the awakening, but how you're attending to the ground from which it arises, moment to moment, here and now. If you attend to that ground in this way that he's active, encouraging, then it will happen by itself. But if you seek for it, worry about it, think, when is it going to come? You're actually planting seeds of weeds in your garden that will choke it off, if that makes sense. So it happens when the mind is no longer seeking, wanting, craving, anxious, fearing, or whatnot. When that mad mind stops and just attends to the here and now, then the awakening process arises by itself, almost inexorably, almost unstoppable. You have to apply a kind of effort to stop it. You have to create a kind of diversion or falseness to stop it because it's our natural state. This is so important to understand because a lot of people begin this and they set goals for themselves. I'm a very smart, professional, accomplished person, and I usually set goals and I get them right on time and usually ahead of time. And so, you set a 12-week advanced enlightenment procedure that you're going to go through, and you're doing everything correctly, right? And you even come early for the sit and stay after the bell rings, even to put in a little extra on it. And nothing seems to be happening. Why? Because instead of tending to the ground, you're tending to the fruit that's around the corner waiting and blah, blah, blah. So you all know there's a famous story my teacher used to tell about the foolish farmer of Sung. Everybody know this story? I hesitate to tell rural agricultural stories in the 21st century in an urban area, but I'll go ahead and anyhow, because like somebody's saying, what's a farmer? I don't know. It's PH, it's something that happens on the web like fishing. No, a farmer is F, and it's someone who cultivates the soil. So anyhow, the story goes, there was a father and a son who had a small farm, and they were growing a crop. Let's say it was rice. And they got everything planted, and the son was doing his thing, and the father came in for his morning breakfast, worked up a whole sweat. It was really sweaty and huffing and puffing, and the son said, "Dad, why are you so tired? The day is just starting." He says, "Oh, I was out in the fields." He said, "Well, what were you doing in the fields?" "I was helping the plants grow. I was helping the crops grow." And the son said, "What do you mean helping the crops grow? Were you watering them?" "Oh, no. I was helping them grow." And he said, "Let's go take a look." And they went out, and all the crops were bent over, wilted, dead. And he asked his father, "What'd you do?" He said, "Well, they were growing about this high, but I thought I'd encourage them and pull them up so they grow faster and stretch them out a little." And of course, by doing that, he pulled out the roots, and the crops die. So the meditation equivalent is this, my teacher used to say, so don't be like the foolish farmer of Sung, who tried to make his crops grow, help his crops grow. Don't worry about your crops. Only just worry about you set up the conditions for the crops to grow, which is to get the confused thinking and attachments out of the way, and the crops come up naturally. Okay, so that being said, we look at this. Hanshan is saying, in general, cultivators, people who practice this, and again, this language is agricultural. If you look at cultivator, it has the idea of an engaged, active practice on some ground. And this is talking about the mind ground, Shindi, the ground of your own being. And you are the cultivator who's bringing forth this natural harvest of your own awakening. Either first experience awakening and then cultivate to fully realize it, or they first cultivate and then they reach an awakening. So he's just taking two methods here. These aren't exclusive. And in fact, if you think about it, if I had time, I was going to read something from the autobiography of Xu Yun, which I've used before. This is a picture of Xu Yun, if you've seen. Very interesting. He was one of the major teachers of my teacher, and lived to be about 119, 120, longer than the longest man in the United States who just died in New York at 112. If he had not been in New York, it would probably been 119. Any event, Xu Yun illustrates both of these. He has an awakening first, and then he progresses to fully realize it through years of cultivation. At the same time, he is cultivating all along, and he reaches different stages of more profound enlightenment. So he's doing both, in a sense, simultaneously. So it says here, you first have an awakening experience. This could be, let's just put it in three. You could have a beginning, an intermediate, or advanced awakening experience. Now, this is just my false dichotomy, okay? Because there's beginning, there's middle beginning, there's advanced beginning. And then there's beginning, intermediate, advanced intermediate, and so on and so forth. You can start to gradate this. But you can have an experience of some kind. You might have an experience of saying, life is short. I've just seen someone very close to me die, and I realize that all of us will die. I will die. What am I doing with my life? I'm not doing anything very meaningful. I'm chasing around all day long, almost like chasing my tail. I should stop and try to do something that has meaning, significance. I should really look into the one great matter. Now, that can be an awakening experience, and it's visceral. It's not like an intellectual thing. It's a movement you have in your whole being that stops you from what you're doing, and you change your course a bit, or profoundly, a lot. Sometimes some people will say, I'm going to go into a monastery. I'm going to pursue this with all my heart and all my soul, my whole being. I'm going to leave behind everything I did before and pursue this path single-mindedly. That's a kind of awakening. But in the process of doing that, a deeper awakening can come. So they can have an experience that sets them on the path, but then the completion of that could take a long time to realize. But sometimes that initial awakening is the stimulus. It's the catalyst that gets you going. And you shouldn't think that it's seeing Buddhas and Bodhisattvas or Guanyins rubbing the crown of your head. It can be something very mundane. For this teacher, a cup drops and smashes to the floor. And the cup smashing, breaking on the floor, triggers some awakening experience. There's been stories where a particular king had an initial awakening experience, left the throne, began to cultivate as a monk. When? He was sitting in the barber's chair. And his barber was cutting his hair, and as his hair fell, his lovely black hair fell, there was one white hair. And he looked down at that hair. And that was a beginning of an awakening. He thought, what is that? That's what's going to happen. My hair will turn white, my teeth will fall. And he began a process, and on that experience, just that. So it's something very mundane, a trip to the dentist, okay? A stepping on the scale. A call from a friend who say, I have cancer. Boom, everything just stopped momentarily. You review what you're doing. A loss, a gain, a disappointment. Anything, the changing of the seasons. You could be, going home and you see a leaf fall. And your conditions would be such that might cause you to turn around, do something. So, or you meet somebody. Often this happens. Somebody you meet or you see somebody who's cultivating, and there's no words exchanged, but the visceral effect of seeing the light and energy of somebody who's cultivating causes you to almost reflect and saying, what am I doing with my being? I want to be and radiate like that person, which in fact was what happened to the Buddha. If you remember the story of the Buddha, he went through stages of seeing impermanence through a dying person, a sick person, an old person. Some people will say also saw a birth. But it wasn't until he encountered a cultivator of the way, where he saw this radiant quality of peace and whatnot, he said, what are you doing? Who's your teacher? What is this about? So he was actually inspired by the scene of somebody who was actually cultivating. And then the same thing happened to the four that were cultivating with him, if you remember the story. Remember, he went out and they were doing this ascetic practice of mortifying the flesh, thinking they could get enlightened by completely suppressing all that's physical and material. And the Buddha said, no, it's not going to work. So he went out and accepted some rice gruel or whatever, and he discovered the middle way. Then he went off and attained a full awakening. And he wanted to come back and share it with the other four. But when he came, from a distance they said, ignore him, here comes the wuss, the wimp. Remember? He was one of the wussas, and he bailed out. So we're going to ignore him. But then as they looked at him, they thought, whoa, this guy's really got some quality of light here. And they could not take their eyes off of him. And finally, they just had to say, what's up? Kind of like, what have you been doing? And thus began the turning of the wheel. This is the first turning, the first ones that were taught. But again, it was on seeing him that they were able to have some initial awakening, and then this goes on. Okay? So that's the illustration. Or you're more like, I would say, my parents, who are Midwestern, very grounded, down-to-earth people. They never want anything quick, even awakening. So their cupboard is stocked with all sorts of things. They do the canning in the fall. Things are parsed out through the season. Everything is very regulated and normal. So they would like to cultivate and then gradually reach awakening. Not too fast, because it might be a little disruptive. It might change, So a little gradual awakening would be just fine. So some people just cultivate. They don't have any profound experience. They're just, every day they're sitting, they're holding the precepts, they're cultivating. People around them are reporting extra, extraordinary states. Oh my gosh, I just saw Amitabha Buddha's Pure Land, and I saw my lotus, and it's really cool. It's a triple-decker lotus for me. And you're saying, I don't see any of that. What's wrong with you? There's nothing wrong with you. Don't worry that you won't have these states, only worry that you won't just everyday cultivate. Because if you everyday cultivate, even if you don't want it, it'll happen. Okay, so this is not to say one's better or worse. What's more, he says, awakening itself has its differences. And he says there's an acquired understanding and a direct realization. So, there are some who gain an understanding of the mind, the nature, through the teachings of the words of the Buddha. Or you could add here the teachers, or even the text. Okay, because after the Buddha leaves, instead of designating someone to be the next teacher, he said, take the Dhamma Vinaya as a teacher, which be the teaching and the precepts. So, you study them, or you hear a teacher, and you get an awakening understanding. This is called awakening through acquired understanding. Now, while this is good, he's not putting down, he says there is a danger with this. These people then can often cling to this acquired knowledge and ideas. So they actually cling to it as almost like an ideology or a philosophical set of constructed ideas and principles. But when they confront, well, we should have changed this. I don't have it changed. We changed this last night. Is it still confronting there? Didn't we change it last night to confronted by? What happened? This is older. Oh, okay. So last night we changed this because you don't confront states. It doesn't. When you're confronted by states, remember the previous thing he says, you're sitting there, nothing's happening. Suddenly the state or emotion arises. It comes up from the eighth consciousness. So you don't confront it. It's not like you're going on. You are confronted by it. So when confronted by states, external, internal, or both, this limited or partial understanding fails them. In other words, it's good, it's intellectually sound, but when you get to the nitty-gritty, it's not available to you because it's not totally embodied or internalized. They then wrestle with these states but can never resolve them. And as a result, these states throw their minds into dissonance, into a conflict they can't resolve. So they really get caught up, taken by the state, and the intellectual understanding does not help break through it. No matter which way they turn, they're stuck, totally obstructed. This is prajna, or wisdom in name only, and this kind of cultivation, is incomplete. So again, it's important to say here, he is not saying that intellectual understanding is not good and perhaps even necessary, but he is saying it's not sufficient of and by itself. There has to be something more than just the intellectual or understanding that came from listening or study. It has to be realized. It has to be, in a sense, second nature now. It has to be your first immediate response. And so the thing about you have an awakening and then there's a realization, what's going on there is you are cultivating it, body, mouth, and mind, in your daily affairs. In every situation, you're rubbing and testing yourself until there's no situation within which you're not totally in that space and totally responsive from that ground. It's actually you. You have become this, to the point that you don't even know that you were responding from an awakened position because it's so quick and so natural. That's what realization means. It means to make it real and immediate for you. So that's all he's saying here. He's not putting down study, he's not putting down intellectual, but he is saying you've got to go further than that. It won't serve you. In any similar probably to if you think of those who go into battle, when they're trained at the military camp and they go through the exercises, they're soldiers. And they know how to carry their weapons, they know how to shoot their weapons, they know the discipline and so forth. But often what's said, and you'll see this also in the Iliad, the Greek classic, when in the heat of battle they finally meet things face to face, that training and understanding often fails them because it's not deeply, it's not experienced, it's not smelted. And so they panic, they fear, they freeze up, they make mistakes, they charge needlessly, they don't have full awareness. And so in the heat of battle, it's not there yet. So that has to be smelted, it has to be acquired. And that's why they use the language in cultivation of smelting. Why you continually go to sessions, why you continually practice, why you continually reflect on daily behavior is you're smelting, you're checking your responses against the understanding to see, am I there, am I there, am I there? And often it's not whether you can explain it, but whether you can actually, in a situation where before you got angry, you don't get angry anymore. And where before you felt envy or jealousy, it doesn't arise anymore. And where you were moved by lust or craving, it naturally does not arise anymore. And then the understanding and the realization are fused. So this might take a while. Just give yourself some space here. But the important thing is you don't quit and you don't fool yourself. You don't pretend that you're there when you're not there. So when something comes up and you fail the test, you go, failed the test. Take stock, renew, start over again. That's my teacher had a verse. It was everything's a test to see what you will do, see how you will do. Mistaking what's before your eyes, you'll have to start anew. So he would say, meditate. You've meditated for 7 days. You meditated for 7 years. You've been holding the precepts. Now I'm going to put you in a situation to test, are you really smelted or not? And invariably we would trip and fall. And he would smile and say, everything's a test, see what you would do, mistaking what's before your eyes, start anew. But not quit, not be defeated, but recognize and see and go on like this. Okay? Helpful? Now, one thing I wanted to share a little bit tonight. I'm just going to, instead of another text, I'm going to read to you a text. I'm doing it old-fashioned. And the reason I'm doing it old-fashioned is because I was lazy and didn't scan this. And then I asked him right now, could he scan it immediately? And he said, no, he'd have to run across the street. And I thought, no. So will all of you bear with me? We'll do an old-fashioned reading. I got a piece of paper here, and I'm going to read it, and it's going to go in your ears and maybe to parts of your heart. So yes, turn that off, and I'm going to be like, oh my gosh, the screen's gone. This is to help you break addiction. And I will go slowly on this. I'll read it slowly. Again, this is a translation of an early text on the practice of meditation, and I thought I'd share it with you tonight so you can see how what we've been going through is coming from a lineage that goes way back. This is actually earlier than Hanshan. Now, although I know it's earlier than Hanshan, if you ask me where it's from, I can't tell you because I didn't cite it. I just copied it down. So I'd have to look it up, but here we go. Ready? The Buddha meditated for 6 years. Bodhidharma for 9. Who's Bodhidharma? Obviously slower than the Buddha, because the Buddha did in 6, he did in 9. Who's Bodhidharma? Huh? Well, he's the first patriarch where? In China. Yeah, we're not going to be Sinocentric here. So he was actually an Indian master who came to China. Okay? And often you'll see the hangings of Bodhidharma. He's represented iconically, aesthetically, he's all over the place. Okay? You go into people's houses who aren't Buddhist, you'll see Bodhidharma. Okay? Often he has a beard, and he's just sitting, meditation. He was ignored when he came to China because he was an outsider, a foreigner. He didn't look Chinese. Okay? But he sat for 9 years. If such effort is required for these ancient masters, how much the more is required of you? You, not me, you. Now, next passage. You search among books, sifting and shuffling through other people's words. And you think this may lead you to the depth of knowledge, but it cannot help you to see the reflection of your own true self. When you've thrown away all your conceptions of mind and body, the original person will appear in his or her fullness. To obtain the inestimable benefits of meditation, you should first make a firm decision to practice every day. Your meditation room should be clean and quiet and free of obnoxious roommates. No, that's free, clean and quiet. Wear loose-fitting clothing and remove your shoes. Sit on a cushion with legs crossed in a comfortable manner as possible. Keep your back straight. Don't lean left or right. Don't tip forward or bend back. Your ears should be lying with your shoulders. Keep your tongue to the roof of your mouth and close your lips. Your eyes should be slightly opened, unfocused on the floor at a 45-degree angle. Breathe through your nostrils. Before you begin meditation, you can take several slow, deep breaths. Hold your body erect, allowing your breathing to become normal again. Now, it doesn't say take deep breath and keep. He's saying if you need to, go, okay, and then let your breathing be normal. Many thoughts will crowd into your mind. Don't dwell on thoughts of good or bad. Don't desire to attain awakening. Let your thoughts come and go without getting involved in them or trying to suppress them. Think the unthinkable. In other words, think no thinking. Now, we'll come back to this later because this is often misunderstood. Meditation is not a way to enlightenment, nor is it a method of achieving anything at all. It is peace and the translation here is blessedness, but you could say it's peace and spirituality itself. It is the actualization, the realization of wisdom, the ultimate truth of the oneness of all things. In your meditation, you yourself are the mirror reflecting the solution of your problems. Whoa. I'll repeat. In your meditation, you yourself are the mirror reflecting the solution of your problems. The human mind has absolute freedom within its true nature, the self-essential nature. You can attain this freedom intuitively. Don't work toward freedom, but allow the work itself to be freedom. When you want to rest, move your body slowly and quietly. Stand up. Practice this meditation in the morning or in the evening or at any leisure time during the day. You will soon realize that your mental burdens are dropping away one by one and that you're gaining an intuitive or insightful power previously undreamed of. There have been thousands upon thousands of people who have practiced meditation and obtained its fruits. Don't doubt its possibilities because of the simplicity of its method. This is really, really interesting. Don't doubt its possibilities because of the simplicity of the method. If you can't find the truth right where you are, where else do you think you will find it? Life is short, and no one knows what the next moment will bring. Cultivate your mind while you still have the opportunity. You will soon discover the treasure of wisdom, which in turn you can share abundantly with others, bringing them happiness and peace. So again, you can tell this is coming out of a bodhisattva path because right at the end, he's not saying so you can just return to your own quiet stillness of yourself, but he says you then opens to a wisdom and a happiness that you can then share and really bring to others. In other words, you bring it to them because you've actually realized it yourself. So I thought I would just read this to you tonight, share it with you, because it hit on many of the points that Han-chan has hit upon and what we're going through in the basics. But there was a couple of lines in there that always struck me. One was you are the mirror to the solution of your own problems. That's one and the other one is if you can't find this truth right within the here and now of you, where do you think you're going to find it? So, again, an ancient both exhortation and instruction on the meditation practice, but also to confirm what I said earlier, what we're doing here is not coming up with some new meditation technique or practice, but simply carrying on a tradition that goes way, way back, as this illustrates, and then Han-chan illustrates as well. So, stop there tonight. If you have questions, probably save them for next week, unless they're really quick. Anything? You have any questions? Okay, any announcements? This is thinking, no thinking. So, okay. No announcements, anything? Okay, we're going to do our transference in English.
May
respect to that review. Did you, somebody called when you guys were